the spate of nullification of elections arising from the 2015 exercise. As at yesterday, 82 elections were nullified, 82, and still free, fair, credible elections can best be guaranteed with appropriate deployment of technology. This is the experience of 2015, adjudged to be the best election ever conducted in the history of this country. I've said it over and over and over that this commission will not experiment, will rather consolidate. Technology has come to stay. Not only will the PVCs and the card readers remain, but we are going to go a step higher to see if we can also deploy technology for collation and transmission of results, so that we make the processes between the conclusion of elections at the polling units and the counting of the final tally at the collation center speedy and even more accurate and technology-driven.
Technology has come to stay, but it doesn't look so, considering the outcome of some of the Supreme Court judgments that we are seeing. But I do not know all of these issues. That's why I'm going to bring my guest in to discuss this matter. A former resident electoral commission with INEC, Mr. Mike Igini, also a legal practitioner, joins us on the program. Thank you so much for coming on the program. Yes, I remember there was a time last year or thereabout, early last year, that you were on the program and we talked about these card readers and some of the controversies over it. But it looks so much that there's going to be a problem, isn't it? Because of, for example, the Ebonyi Supreme Court, the outcome of the Ebonyi case looks so much that technology is not really part of our laws.
Well, Sean, thank you very much. And happy Valentine's to Nigerians. First, I want to make a few remarks. And that is that in any society, the path we have chosen to take, the choices that we make will depend on the kind of things we want in our country. You see, from time immemorial, the interplay of social forces, for good and bad, and those who succeed will determine the path society will take. It is most unfortunate that we are back to another debate as to whether the card reader should be used in our elections or not. It's unfortunate because we are not unaware of our history, of the use of how election has been rigged over the years. And as you all know, a credible register all over the world is the foundation of any credible election. Now, from 1959 to 1960, 1964, all down to 1999, the Akpata-led regime started contemplating the idea on how to sanitize the voter register. Because if you get that thing right, every other thing will go well. Now, from that moment, he didn't have enough time. Then, of course, Dr. Abel Gubadia came in and commenced the process of what he called electronic voters registration. And Nigerians therefore moved away and started with the OIMR form. Then he came to the regime of Professor Maurice Iwu with the direct data capture meeting. The process was sabotaged because that was the time we now had, when Iwu came in, which was what the Iwu regime now introduced. You now had a photograph of everybody here. The process was sabotaged.
How
now it's sabotaged because that was when, you recall, politicians had DDC machine in their homes. and they were cutting the picture up in a calendar, and they messed up that process, with the consequence that foreigners' names were all in the register. And now we moved away. The first one, when we're talking about manual, because there's a crisis of definition, we'll come to that. What is actually a manual? People are still thinking that Nigeria is under a manual register. Nigeria is no longer using a manual register. Nigeria is using electronic voters register and not manual. This was the time we were using manual, ordinary paper.
This was pre-2007.
Yeah, this was the old pre-2000, not even, yes, pre-2007.
Yeah.
This is what we're using. Now, by the time the Professor Jega-led team came in, and that was where I served.
In 2010.
In 2010. The first issue that we faced, the commission faced as at that time, was whether we should continue with that old register that was deficient in integrity, because you had somewhere foreigners' names were on the register and Nigerians, they were not on the register.
Even children's names were on the register.
Absolutely. There was a huge debate in the country. Curiously, as at that time, politicians were saying that we must use the old register, because most of them, they knew how they have populated the register, and that's what they wanted. On the 16th of September, 2010, the commission had a meeting in Calabar, a commission's meeting. It was from that process it was agreed that we should go for a new voter register. Now, before we go to that, please let us establish the following. That the election management body, by virtue, is a creation of law. First and foremost, it's a creation of law. And at all times must work within the framework of the law. Therefore, electoral laws are basically a composite of the Constitution, the Electoral Acts, the guidelines and manuals that Section 153 of the law empowers the EMB to make, as well also as judgment of court, particularly Court of Superior Record, the Court of Appeal and Supreme Court. It's within this framework, within these powers given to INEC, that the commission decided then to sanitize, as you have said from your executive summary, the register. And so, we went out to procure what we call a DDC machine. All right? A DDC machine. Now, and that represents, if you look at the entire stages here, these are the stages that the nation is going. We are just right at stage 9.
Out of how many?
Out of 13 stages.
Okay.
Now, the manual represents number 1 stage from 1959. We're doing what we call manual. And that is, a voter will come before you.
Just present.
No, it doesn't present anything. Nothing to present at all. He will come, then you will register because it's said to have been of age. You use a biro to write it. Thereafter, you also will write the card manually. That's when we're doing manual registration. So when the commission, starting from Gobadia's time, with the OMR form, we have moved away from manual. But people are still thinking about the manual, still thinking about the analog. And we have moved away from that. Now, immediately we did that, we bought what we call the DDC machine. From the DDC machine, we collected data across the country. You come forward, they will register you, take your biometrics, because we had announced to the nation as at that time that this will be a forerunner to the use of a car reader
in the future.
In the future. Now, from that, we did consolidation of the data. From consolidation, you run the AFIS.
Yeah.
After running the AFIS, that's stage 4.
Where you have your
exactly the duplication process to remove all duplicates where we have multiple registrations. You do that. Now, in the INEC DDC machine, like the laptop, you remember that what we used at that time was a laptop.
In 2011.
2011,
yeah.
When we did the registration, it was a laptop. Now, when you did that registration, there was a special button in the DDC machine, because we were looking for what we call all-inclusive electoral process. Those who have disabilities, those who don't have fingers, all right? there was a button in this machine to accommodate them. But what happened? Politicians, somehow, worked with some of the
maneuver, the exercise.
The exercise. What they were doing is America. Suddenly, in the whole community, they would no longer have fingers anymore. They were now populating the register. So we now discover that you cannot use this register because the PVC you are going to use for the car reader, you must have, first and foremost have your fingers in there. How can you now you see the faces of people, but there's no finger? And you remember that when we did registration, you registered 10 fingers of everybody. That led to the level of what we call the post-business rule.
Yeah.
Now, to sanitize that process, when we got to the level of post-business rule,
that was very close to 2015
exactly.
election. Yeah.
Now, you now have a situation where at least Nigerians who will be issued a permanent voter's card will be having a minimum of at least 4 fingerprints right there in the system. Now, immediately after that, we decided that then to produce what we call the permanent voter's card. Now, when the PVC was produced, all right, the first usage of that PVC was in Ekiti State. The commission had envisioned that the commission was rolling out the PVC for the first time, you cannot have what to deal with one problem we are having right now, which was as at that time. When you conduct election and you want to determine the margin of win, should it be based on the total number of registered voters or those who had the card to vote?